On March 11th, 2011, at 2:46 p.m. local time, a massive magnitude 9.1 earthquake struck off the coast of Tōhoku, Japan. One of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded in human history. The earthquake lasted approximately 6 minutes, shaking the ground violently across northeastern Japan. Buildings swayed, power lines fell, and millions of people took shelter as the earth moved beneath them. But the earthquake was only the beginning. Approximately 40 minutes after the earthquake, a massive tsunami triggered by the seismic rupture slammed into the northeastern coast of Japan. Waves reached heights of up to 40 meters, 130 feet in some areas. The tsunami traveled up to 10 kilometers, 6 miles inland, obliterating entire coastal towns and cities. Cars, buildings, ships, and people were swept away in an unstoppable wall of water. Entire communities were erased in minutes. And then, as Japan was still grappling with the immediate catastrophe, a third disaster unfolded. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, damaged by the earthquake and overwhelmed by the tsunami, experienced multiple reactor meltdowns, the worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl in 1986. When it was over, more than 18,000 people were confirmed dead or missing. Entire towns had been reduced to rubble and debris. Hundreds of thousands were displaced from their homes. The nuclear disaster contaminated vast areas, forcing evacuations that continue to this day. This is the story of March 11, 2011, the day Japan faced 3 disasters at once, the day that changed the nation forever, and a tribute to the more than 18,000 souls lost to the earthquake and tsunami, and the survivors who lived through the unimaginable. Part 1. Before the disaster, Japan and the Tōhoku region. Japan, a nation built on earthquake awareness. Japan sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. The Japanese islands are located where 4 major tectonic plates meet: the Pacific Plate, the Philippine Sea Plate, the Eurasian Plate, the North American Plate. As these plates constantly move and interact, earthquakes are a regular part of Japanese life. Japan experiences thousands of earthquakes per year, most too small to feel, but some large and destructive. Japanese earthquake preparedness. Because of this constant seismic threat, Japan had become arguably the most earthquake-prepared nation on Earth by 2011. Building codes. Strict building codes requiring earthquake-resistant construction. Buildings designed to sway and flex during earthquakes rather than collapse. Regular inspections and retrofitting of older structures. Early warning systems. Sophisticated earthquake detection and warning systems, warnings sent to phones, TVs, radios seconds before shaking arrives, automated systems that could stop trains, shut off gas lines, public education, regular earthquake drills in schools and workplaces, public awareness campaigns about earthquake safety, culture of preparedness. Most homes had emergency supplies, infrastructure, seawalls, and tsunami barriers along vulnerable coastlines, designated tsunami evacuation routes and shelters. Emergency response plans at every level of government. Japan had learned hard lessons from past earthquakes. The Great Kanto earthquake of 1923, 140,000 dead. The Kobe earthquake of 1995, 6,434 dead. By 2011, Japan felt confident in its preparedness. The country had invested billions in earthquake and tsunami defenses. Most Japanese people had experienced multiple earthquakes in their lives and knew the safety procedures, but no one was prepared for what was coming. And on March 11th, 2011, the Tōhoku region. The Tōhoku region occupies the northeastern portion of Japan's main island, Honshu. It includes 6 prefectures: Aomori, Iwate, Miyagi, Akita, Yamagata, Fukushima. Characteristics of Tōhoku. The region was known for beautiful, rugged coastline along the Pacific Ocean, fishing villages and port towns that had existed for centuries, agricultural communities, traditional Japanese culture and hospitality, close-knit communities where everyone knew their neighbors, relatively rural compared to Tokyo and other major cities' aging population. Many young people had moved to cities for work, coastal towns. Many towns along the Tōhoku coast had populations of a few thousand to tens of thousands. Rikuzentakata, population approximately 23,000. Minami Sanriku, population approximately 17,000. Kezanuma, population approximately 73,000. Ishinomaki, population approximately 160,000. Onagawa, population approximately 10,000. These were working-class communities where fishing was a major industry families had lived for generations. Life moved at a slower pace than in Tokyo. People knew and looked after each other, pride in local traditions and a way of life. Many of these towns had sea walls built to protect against tsunamis, some quite substantial, 10, 15 meters high in places. Residents felt reasonably protected. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Located in Fukushima Prefecture on the Pacific coast, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant was operated by Tokyo Electric Power Company, TEPCO, the plant. 6 boiling water reactors, units 1-6, built between 1971 and 1979, provided significant electricity to Tokyo and surrounding areas, employed thousands of workers located on the coast for easy access to seawater for cooling. Safety features, designed to withstand earthquakes and tsunamis, multiple backup safety systems, seawall to protect against tsunamis, 10 meters, 33 feet high. Emergency diesel generators for backup power, regular safety inspections and drills. However, the plant was built based on 1960s to 70s understanding of tsunami risks in the region. Historical records showed tsunamis had reached 10, 15 meters in the past, but the plant's seawall was designed for waves up to 10 meters based on available data at the time. March 11, 2011, an ordinary Friday afternoon. Friday, March 11, 2011. Started as a normal day in Tōhoku and across Japan. Students were in school finishing their classes for the week. Workers were at their jobs. Elderly residents were at home or running errands. Fishermen were at sea or preparing boats. The weather was cool but clear early spring in northern Japan. At the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, reactors 1, 2, and 3 were operating. Reactors 4, 5, and 6 were shut down for maintenance. Approximately 6,000 workers were on site or nearby. Everything was operating normally. Across Japan, people were going about their daily lives, unaware that in minutes, everything would change. Part 2. The earthquake. 2:46 p.m., March 11th, 2011. 2 hours, 46 minutes, and 23 seconds Pache. The earthquake begins at precisely 2:46 and 23 seconds p.m. Japan Standard Time. The seafloor off the coast of Tōhoku ruptured. What happened below the ocean? Approximately 70 kilometers, 43 miles, east of the Oshika Peninsula and about 30 kilometers, 19 miles, below the seafloor. A section of the Pacific plate that had been slowly sliding beneath the North American plate suddenly broke free. The rupture was catastrophic. A section of the fault approximately 500 kilometers, 310 miles long and 200 kilometers, 120 miles wide ruptured. The seafloor moved up to 50 meters, 164 feet. Horizontally, parts of the seafloor thrust upward by several meters. This massive movement displaced an enormous volume of water above it. The magnitude. The earthquake was initially reported as magnitude 7.9, then upgraded to 8.8, then 8.9, and finally settled at magnitude 9.1, making it the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Japan, the 4th most powerful earthquake in the world since modern record-keeping began, 1900. Among the top 5 most powerful earthquakes ever recorded in human history. The amount of energy released was staggering, equivalent to approximately 600 million times the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Enough energy to power the entire United States for several days. The earthquake was so powerful, it shifted Earth's axis by about 25 centimeters, and shortened the length of a day by about 1.8 microseconds. The shaking. Duration. The intense shaking lasted approximately 6 minutes, an extraordinarily long time for an earthquake. Most earthquakes last seconds. Even major ones typically last less than a minute. 6 minutes of violent shaking is almost unimaginable. Intensity. In coastal Tōhoku, Shindo intensity, 6 plus to 7, Japan's intensity scale. In Tokyo, 373 kilometers, 232 miles from epicenter. Shindo intensity 5 plus felt across most of Honshu, and as far south as Kyushu. What people experienced. In Tōhoku, near the epicenter, when the shaking began, buildings swayed violently, objects fell from shelves, pictures crashed to the floor. People couldn't stand. Many fell to the ground. Panic and fear as the shaking continued and continued and continued. Some buildings began to crack or collapse despite earthquake-resistant design. Power lines fell, sparks flew, roads cracked and buckled. Landslides began in hilly areas. For people who had experienced many earthquakes, this was different. The intensity and duration were terrifying. Many thought, this is it, the big one we've always feared. In schools, students were still in class at 2:46 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. Teachers immediately ordered students to take cover under desks, standard earthquake drill procedure. Students covered their heads and held onto desk legs, but the shaking went on and on. Some ceiling tiles fell, lights swayed dangerously. Fear escalated as students realized this was no ordinary earthquake. Teachers tried to keep students calm while also terrified themselves. At Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, when the earthquake struck, automated systems detected the seismic waves and immediately initiated emergency shutdown. Scram procedures for reactors 1, 2, and 3 control rods were automatically inserted into the reactor cores to stop fission reactions. The plant lost connection to the external power grid. Power lines fell in the earthquake. Emergency diesel generators automatically kicked in to provide backup power for cooling systems. Plant workers took emergency positions. Everything was functioning as designed. The earthquake had caused the reactors to shut down safely and backup systems were working. At that moment, plant managers and workers believed they had successfully weathered the earthquake. But they had only 40 minutes before the tsunami would arrive. In Tokyo, even 373 kilometers, 232 miles from the epicenter, Tokyo experienced intense shaking. High-rise buildings swayed dramatically, designed to do so. Elevators automatically stopped and locked. Trains across the city immediately halted. Millions of people took cover. Some older buildings sustained damage, but Tokyo's stringent building codes meant most structures survived intact. The aftermath of the earthquake alone. When the 6 minutes of shaking finally stopped, buildings were damaged across northeastern Japan. Some older structures had collapsed. Fires had broken out in several locations. Power was out across wide areas. Transportation was disrupted. People were injured or trapped in damaged buildings. Phone networks were overloaded as millions tried to call loved ones. If the disaster had ended with just the earthquake, it would have been serious but manageable. Japan's preparations had largely worked. Building codes had prevented mass casualties. Warning systems had functioned, and people had taken appropriate shelter. Casualties from the earthquake alone were relatively limited. Perhaps 100, 200 deaths directly from the shaking and its immediate effects. Collapsed buildings, falling objects, etc. But the earthquake had set in motion something far more devastating. The tsunami warning. Within minutes of the earthquake, Japan's meteorological agency issued tsunami warnings for the Pacific coast. Initial estimates predicted waves of 6 meters, 20 feet, later upgraded to 10 meters, 33 feet, or higher. Evacuation orders were issued for coastal areas. Warning sirens began sounding in coastal towns. Announcements over loudspeakers urged people to evacuate to high ground immediately. People in coastal communities heard the warnings and began evacuating. Many headed for designated tsunami evacuation buildings or high ground. But many didn't fully grasp the scale of what was coming. Some initial estimates suggested waves of 3, 6 meters significant, but not catastrophic. Coastal seawalls were 10, 15 meters high in many areas. Some residents believed they were protected. Others, particularly elderly residents, were slow to evacuate. Some went back home to get belongings. Some refused to leave their homes where they'd lived their entire lives. As people were evacuating and trying to get to safety, the tsunami was racing across the Pacific Ocean toward Japan's coast. Approximately 40 minutes after the earthquake, the first waves would hit. Part 3. The tsunami, 3:27 p.m. onward. How the tsunami formed. When the seafloor ruptured during the earthquake, massive sections of the ocean floor thrust upward by several meters. This displaced an enormous volume of water above it. The displaced water formed a series of waves, a tsunami, in deep ocean. These waves traveled at speeds of 700 to 800 kilometers per h, 435 to 500 miles per hour, as fast as a jet airplane. In deep water, the waves were relatively small, less than a meter high, and spread far apart. But as the waves approached shallow coastal waters, physics changed everything. The shoaling effect. As tsunami waves enter shallow water, they slow down dramatically. But the wave height increases dramatically. Energy that was spread through deep water is compressed into shallower water. Waves that were 1 meter tall in deep ocean can become 10, 40 meters tall as they approach shore. The arrival. The first waves began hitting the Tōhoku coast around 3:27 p.m., approximately 40 minutes after the earthquake. But these weren't ordinary waves crashing on a beach. A tsunami is different from a wind-driven wave. It's not a single breaking wave. It's more like a rapidly rising wall of water. The ocean itself seems to rise and keep rising. It can continue advancing inland for 5, 10 minutes or more. Multiple waves come in succession. Often the first is not the largest. What people saw, those who witnessed the tsunami's arrival from safe vantage points, hills, tall buildings, describe scenes that haunt them still. The ocean recedes. First, in many areas, the ocean receded, pulling back from the shore, exposing the seafloor. Boats in harbors were left on mud. This is a classic tsunami warning sign, but it also drew some curious people toward the water to see a fatal mistake. The wall of water. Then the wall came. From a distance, witnesses saw a dark line on the horizon. As it approached, they realized it was a massive wall of water, in some areas 10 meters, 33 feet, high. In others, 20 meters, 66 feet, and in some locations reaching 40 meters, 130 feet. The black water, black because it was carrying soil, debris, and everything it had picked up, rushed towards shore at tremendous speed. The impact. When the tsunami hit, sea walls were overwhelmed. The massive concrete sea walls that coastal towns had relied on for protection were simply overtopped. In many cases, 10-meter sea walls faced 15, 20-meter waves. The water poured over the top and smashed into the towns behind them. Total destruction. Wooden houses were instantly swept away. Even concrete buildings were damaged or destroyed. Cars, trucks, and buses were tossed like toys. Ships were picked up and carried inland. Trees, power lines, and infrastructure were obliterated. People who hadn't reached safety were swept away. The sound. Survivors described the sound as indescribable. A deep, terrifying roar. The screech and crash of buildings being destroyed. The grinding of debris. Car alarms. Gas explosions. And underneath it all, the rush of water. The debris field. The tsunami created a massive debris field as it moved inland. Buildings torn apart, mixed with cars, boats, trees, furniture. This debris became additional weapons, smashing into anything in the water's path. People caught in the water faced not just drowning, but being crushed or trapped in debris. How far inland? In many areas, the tsunami traveled 5, 10 kilometers, 3, 6 miles inland, following rivers and valleys, flooding low-lying areas, stopping only when the land rose high enough or the wave's energy was finally dissipated. Part 4. Specific towns, the human cost. The tsunami affected hundreds of communities along the Tōhoku coast. Here are stories from some of the hardest hit. Rikuzentakata. Before March 11th, 2011. Population. Approximately 23,000 beautiful coastal city with a famous pine forest. 70,000 trees planted centuries ago. City hall, schools, hospital, businesses, tight-knit community. The tsunami. Waves reached 15, 20 meters, 49, 66 feet. Overtopped the seawall completely. The tsunami obliterated approximately 80% of the city's building. Only a handful of structures survived of the famous 70,000 tree pine forest. Only one tree survived, later named the Miracle Pine. 600+ residents died or went missing. City Hall was destroyed. Many government workers died at their posts. Minami-Sanraku. Before March 11th, population. Approximately 17,000 fishing town built around a bay, 3-story disaster response center served as evacuation site. The tsunami. Waves reached 15, 20 meters, completely inundated the town. Approximately 70% of buildings destroyed. The disaster response center, where people had evacuated for safety, was overwhelmed. Waves reached above the 3rd floor. Miki Endo, a 24-year-old town official, remained at her post, broadcasting tsunami warnings over loudspeakers until the building was engulfed. Her voice saved many lives, but she died. 800+ residents died or went missing. Kesenuma, population approximately 73,000. Major fishing port. The tsunami, waves 10, 15 meters. Massive fires broke out when fuel from port facilities spread across the water. Buildings burned while still flooded. Survivors witnessed the horrifying sight of flames on waterships carried inland. One fishing vessel ended up on top of a building. 200+ died or missing. Ishinomaki, population approximately 160,000. Largest city heavily affected. The tsunami, waves 10, 15 meters. Massive flooding across wide areas. Ishinomaki Elementary School tragedy. Many had evacuated to what they thought was safe high ground. But the water reached even there. 600+ died or missing, the highest death toll of any city. Onagawa, Population, approximately 10,000. Nuclear power plant in the area, which fortunately survived intact. The tsunami. Waves reached an astounding 20-plus meters. The town's disaster management center, a 3-story building, was completely swept away. Approximately 70% of buildings destroyed, 800-plus died or missing. Common stories. Across all these towns, similar stories. Schools. Many schools were located in low-lying areas. Teachers and students had evacuated following earthquake procedures. In most cases, schools had practiced tsunami evacuation drills and knew to go to high ground. Many schools saved all their students by following evacuation procedures. But some schools were too close to the coast, or underestimated how far inland the tsunami would reach. Parents arrived at schools, searching desperately for children. Heartbreaking reunions when children were found safe, devastating searches when they weren't. Elderly residents. Many elderly residents were less mobile and slower to evacuate. Some refused to leave homes they'd lived in for decades. Others couldn't climb to higher ground quickly enough. The elderly accounted for a disproportionate percentage of tsunami deaths. The brave who stayed. Public officials who remained at their posts, broadcasting warnings, like Mickey Endo. Police officers who stayed to direct traffic and evacuations. Firefighters who helped the elderly and disabled evacuate. Many of these individuals saved others while losing their own lives. Split-second decisions. People who turned back to get belongings and were caught by the wave. Those who drove instead of walking to high ground and got stuck in traffic. Families separated in the chaos. Parents at work unable to reach children at school. Children who became orphans. In minutes, the survivors. Those who made it to high ground watched their entire towns disappear. People clinging to debris and freezing water for hours before rescue survivors pulled from rubble days later. Those who lost entire families. Communities that lost half their population. Part 5. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. While the tsunami was devastating coastal communities, another catastrophe was unfolding at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. When the tsunami hit Fukushima Daiichi, the plant was located directly on the coast. When the tsunami arrived around 3:27 p.m., wave height, the waves that hit the plant were 15 meters, 46, 49 feet. High, the plant's seawall was only 10 meters, 33 feet. High. The waves easily overtopped the seawall and flooded the plant. What failed? 1. The emergency diesel generators. The plant had emergency diesel generators to provide backup power if external power was lost. These generators were supposed to be the backup to keep cooling systems running. Critical design, flaw. The emergency generators were located in the basements of the reactor buildings and in underground rooms. When the tsunami flooded the plant, seawater poured into the basements. The emergency diesel generators were submerged. They failed the plant, lost all power. A total blackout, called station blackout. 2. The batteries. The plant had battery backup systems, but these were only designed to last 8 hours. What this meant? Nuclear reactors, even after they're shut down, continue producing heat from radioactive decay. This decay heat requires continuous cooling for days or weeks after shutdown. Without electricity, cooling pumps couldn't operate. Water couldn't be circulated to remove heat from the reactor cores. The temperature in the reactor cores would begin rising. If cooling wasn't restored, the cores would overheat, eventually leading to meltdown. The plant had approximately 8 hours, until batteries died, to restore cooling or face nuclear disaster. The race against time. Plant workers and TEPCO officials worked desperately, trying to restore power, attempting to bring in mobile generators, trying to manually operate cooling systems, but the plant was devastated by tsunami damage, roads were blocked. Equipment was damaged. Time was running out. The explosions, over the following days, disaster upon disaster. March 12th, day after earthquake. Reactor 1's core was overheating. Hydrogen gas built up in the reactor building. At 3:36 p.m. explosion, the hydrogen exploded, blowing apart the outer containment building of Reactor 1. The explosion was captured on video and shocked the world. This was the first confirmation that the plant was in serious trouble. March 14th. Reactor 3's building exploded in an even larger blast. Massive cloud of smoke and debris, several workers injured. March 15th. Reactor 2's containment was breached. Reactor 4's building exploded. Reactor 4 had been shut down for maintenance, but its spent fuel pool was at risk. The meltdowns. Despite desperate efforts, 3 reactors experienced partial core meltdowns. Reactor 1, full meltdown. Reactor 2, partial meltdown. Reactor 3, partial meltdown. Radioactive material was released into the atmosphere and environment. The evacuations. As the nuclear crisis escalated, March 11th evening, 3 kilometers, 1.9 mile evacuation zone declared around plant extended to 10 kilometers. March 12th. Extended to 20 kilometers, 12.4 miles, approximately 170,000 people ordered to evacuate. March 15, 20 to 30 kilometers zone. Residents advised to shelter indoors, eventually extended evacuation zones further. The evacuations were chaotic. Many had already lost homes to tsunami. Now evacuating from radiation hospitals had to be evacuated, including patients too sick to move easily. Elderly from nursing homes evacuated. Some evacuees died during or after evacuation due to stress and lack of medical care. The Fukushima 50. While most workers evacuated, approximately 50 workers volunteered to stay at the plant to fight the crisis. They worked in extremely dangerous conditions with high radiation levels, attempting to restore cooling, prevent further explosions, minimize radioactive releases. These workers, dubbed the Fukushima 50, became heroes in Japan. They knew they were likely exposing themselves to dangerous radiation levels, but stayed because someone had to. The long-term nuclear crisis, the Fukushima nuclear disaster, became the worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl, 1986, rated level 7, the highest level on the International Nuclear Event Scale, same as Chernobyl, released significant radioactive contamination into the air, soil, and ocean, created an exclusion zone that remains largely uninhabited till it damaged public trust in nuclear power worldwide. Radioactive contamination. Approximately 1,600 square kilometers were contaminated. Some areas remain too radioactive for human habitation. Decontamination efforts have been ongoing for years at enormous cost. Ocean contamination from radioactive water. Part 6. The toll numbers that represent lives. The death toll. Official confirmed deaths. 15,899. As of 2021. Missing, presumed dead. 2,529 total. 18,428 deaths. How they died. Approximately 90% died from drowning in the tsunami. The remaining 10% from the earthquake, building collapse, landslides, etc. Fires or related causes, where they died. Miyagi Prefecture, 9,540 deaths, most affected Iwate Prefecture. 4,675 deaths, Fukushima Prefecture. 1,614 deaths, other areas, smaller numbers, who they were. By age, 65% of victims were aged 60 or older. The elderly were disproportionately affected, less mobile, slower to evacuate children, accounted for a smaller percentage because schools had evacuation procedures. By gender, slightly more women than men, typical in tsunami disasters, as women are often less strong swimmers and may have been caring for children or elderly. Families lost. Entire families died together. Many children became orphans. Many parents lost children. Siblings separated. Some found, some not. The missing. More than 2,500 people remain officially missing, presumably swept out to sea, buried in debris, or otherwise never recovered. For families, this is an ongoing agony. No body to bury. No closure. Annual searches continue as families look for remains. Some remains are found years later and identified through DNA, the displaced. Immediately after, approximately 470,000 people evacuated or displaced stayed in emergency shelters, school gyms, community centers. Conditions were difficult. Cold, March in northern Japan. Limited food, no privacy. Long term. As of 2021, 10 years later, approximately 40,000 people still displaced, some because their homes were destroyed and towns never rebuilt. Some because of radiation in Fukushima, unable to return home. Orphans, 500+ children lost one or both parents, many raised by relatives. Some in orphanages, psychological trauma, economic cost, estimated total damage, $235, 300 billion USD. Most expensive natural disaster in history includes destroyed infrastructure, homes, businesses. Fukushima cleanup costs alone estimated $200+ billion. Property destroyed. 121, 000 plus buildings completely destroyed, 280. 000 plus buildings partially destroyed or damaged, entire towns erased, infrastructure obliterated over wide areas. Part 7. The response, rescue, recovery, resilience. Immediate rescue efforts. The first 72 hours. Despite being victims themselves, Japanese rescue workers, self-defense forces, police, and firefighters mounted massive rescue efforts, searching through rubble. Rescue teams searched through debris for survivors using trained dogs, heat sensors, listening devices, calling out, listening for responses. Dangerous work, unstable structures, fires, water, cold. Miraculous survivals. 80-year-old woman pulled from rubble after 9 days. 16-year-old boy found floating on roof after 2 days at sea. Various individuals found alive in air pockets in collapsed buildings. Each rescue gave hope. But mostly rescuers found bodies, not survivors. The tsunami's violence meant few survived being caught in it. By 72 hours after the tsunami, hope for finding more survivors alive faded. International help. Countries around the world sent assistance. Search and rescue teams, medical teams, relief supplies, financial aid. The United States launched Operation Tomodachi, friend, 24,000 US. Military personnel involved ships, aircraft, equipment search and rescue, transport, logistics, marines, and sailors working alongside Japanese forces, the displaced. Emergency shelters. Hundreds of thousands of people crowded into emergency shelters. School gymnasiums, community centers. Any building that survived conditions were hard. Cold, crowded, no privacy, limited food. But Japanese culture shone. People waited patiently in orderly lines for food and water, sharing what little they had, helping each other, maintaining dignity, despite desperate circumstances. The world was struck by how calm and orderly evacuees remained, despite unimaginable loss. Identifying the dead. Grim task of identifying victims. Bodies recovered from debris and water brought to temporary morgues. Families came to identify loved ones. When identification was unclear, DNA testing, Buddhist and Shinto funeral rites conducted mass graves in some areas where identification was impossible. The cleanup. The scale of debris was staggering. An estimated 25 million tons of debris created by tsunami mountains of wreckage. Cars, buildings, boats, trees, belongings, everything piled in massive debris fields. Sorting through debris for human remains and personal effects that could be returned to families' years of work, rebuilding. The Japanese government and people committed to rebuilding new higher seawalls, some 40+ feet high, relocating towns to higher ground, building tsunami evacuation towers, improving warning systems, stricter building codes, but also recognition that some towns might never fully recover. Part 8, the aftermath. Fukushima's long shadow. The nuclear crisis continues. While the immediate crisis at Fukushima stabilized, the problems continue. Contaminated water. Cooling water must still be pumped through damaged reactors. This water becomes radioactive, stored in thousands of tanks on site. As of the 2021, over 1.25 million tons stored. Decision to release treated water into ocean highly controversial. Decommissioning. The process of decommissioning the damaged reactors expected to take 30 and 40 years. Cost estimated at $200+ billion. Technically extremely challenging. High radiation makes work difficult. Exclusion zone. Areas within 20 kilometers of plant. Restricted or no-go zones. Some areas have been decontaminated and reopened, but many areas remain too radioactive. Former residents cannot return home. The evacuees. People displaced by radiation. Approximately 160,000 people were evacuated from areas near Fukushima Daiichi. Their stories. Families that left with nothing, thinking they'd return in days. 10+ years later, many still can't go home. Homes abandoned, slowly decaying towns, frozen in time. Cars parked where owners left them. Stores with merchandise still on shelves. Pets and livestock left behind. Many rescued by volunteers. Many died. Compensation. TEPCO forced to pay compensation. But many feel amounts are inadequate. Some compensation takes years to receive. Can't replace lost homes, communities, way of life. Fukushima stigma. People and products from Fukushima face discrimination. Fukushima residents discriminated against. Fear of radiation. Children from Fukushima bullied at schools in other regions. Fukushima agricultural products avoided by consumers, despite testing showing safety. Fukushima labeled as contaminated in public consciousness. Residents fighting this stigma. Nuclear policy changes. Japan's response to Fukushima. Immediate. All nuclear reactors in Japan shut down for safety reviews. By May 2012, zero nuclear power generation for first time in decades. Long term. Public opinion turned against nuclear power protests against restarting reactors. Government promises to reduce dependence on nuclear, but also recognition that Japan lacks other energy resources. Some reactors eventually restarted with much stricter safety standards. Debate continues. Worldwide, Germany decided to phase out all nuclear power. Other countries reviewed nuclear safety. Some countries slowed nuclear expansion. But many countries continued with nuclear programs. Fukushima reignited global debate about nuclear safety. Part 9. Stories of survival and loss. Individual stories. Miki Endo, the voice that saved thousands. Miki Endo, 24 years old, was a crisis management official in Minami Sanroku. When the earthquake hit, she went to the town's disaster response center, a 3-story building, and began broadcasting tsunami warning over the town's loudspeaker system. Even as the tsunami approached, she continued broadcasting. Please evacuate to higher ground. A huge tsunami is coming. Run to higher ground now. Her voice, urgent and clear, echoed through the town, warning residents and spurring them to evacuate. As the water rose around the building, she continued broadcasting. The tsunami ultimately reached above the 3rd floor. The building was engulfed. Miki Endo died at her post, but her warnings saved countless lives. She is remembered as a hero. Her memorial stands where the disaster response center once was, the Okawa Elementary School tragedy. Okawa Elementary School in Ishinomaki had 108 students and 13 staff on site when the earthquake hit. Following earthquake procedures, students and staff gathered in the schoolyard. The school was near a river, about 4 to 5 kilometers from the coast. Teachers debated where to evacuate. The school had an evacuation plan, but there was confusion about whether the tsunami would reach them. For nearly 50 minutes after the earthquake, students and staff remained in the schoolyard or near the school, debating where to go. At approximately 3:37 p.m., the tsunami arrived, traveling up the river. The school was inundated. Of the 108 students, 74 died. 4 were never found, presumed dead. Of the 13 staff, 10 died. Only 4 students and 1 teacher survived. The tragedy devastated families and sparked investigations into why better decisions weren't made. The school was located near hills where students could have evacuated. The students of Kamaishi. In contrast, Kamaishi City's schools became a success story. Due to extensive tsunami education and regular drills, when the earthquake hit, approximately 3,000 students from various schools in Kamaishi immediately began evacuating to designated high ground areas without waiting for instructions. Their quick, decisive action saved lives. Of the thousands of students, 99.8% survived. Only 5 students died, and those were students who were at home or already outside school when tsunami hit. The Kamaishi miracle became a case study in the power of preparedness and education. Survivors' guilt. Many survivors live with guilt. Those who survived while family members died. Those who chose to evacuate while friends stayed. First responders who couldn't save everyone. Teachers who made decisions that led to student deaths. The ongoing psychological trauma. The orphans. Children who lost parents face ongoing struggles. Raised by relatives. Often grandparents, some in orphanages, living with trauma and loss. Many now young adults still processing what happened. Part 10. Remembrance and lessons. Memorials across Tōhoku. Memorials honor the victims. Stone monuments listing names. Preserved tsunami-damaged buildings, like the Minami Sanroku Disaster Response Building. Museums documenting the disaster annual memorial services on March 11th, the Miracle Pine. In Rikuzen Takata of 70,000 pine trees, only 1 survived the tsunami. This miracle pine became a symbol of resilience and hope. Though the tree eventually died from saltwater damage, it was preserved and reconstructed as a memorial. Lessons learned. What worked? Earthquake, preparedness. Japan's building codes, early warning systems, and culture of earthquake preparedness meant the earthquake itself caused relatively few deaths. This was a success. Immediate response. Japanese self-defense forces, rescue workers, and international assistance mobilized quickly and effectively. Social cohesion. Japanese culture of mutual support, patience, and resilience helped communities endure the aftermath. Some evacuations, areas where residents immediately evacuated to high ground, like Kamishi students, had high survival rates. What failed? Underestimating tsunami. Despite tsunami preparedness, many seawalls and evacuation plans were based on historical tsunamis. The 2011 tsunami exceeded these estimates. Nuclear safety. Fukushima's design didn't account for a tsunami of this size. Backup generators in basements were a fatal flaw. The nuclear disaster was preventable. Evacuation delays. In some areas, people delayed evacuating, underestimated the danger, or didn't evacuate far enough inland. Communication. In some cases, confusion about evacuation routes or timing led to deaths. Changes since the 2011. Tsunami preparedness. Higher seawalls built, though debate about effectiveness and cost. Towns relocated to higher ground. Improved evacuation routes and signage. Regular tsunami evacuation drills. Public education emphasizing, don't wait, don't hesitate, evacuate immediately to highest ground possible. Nuclear safety, much stricter safety requirements for nuclear plants. Elevated backup generators, improved tsunami defenses, enhanced oversight, but also recognition that nuclear power carries inherent risks. Building back. Some towns have rebuilt and populations are returning. Others remained largely empty residents dispersed, unwilling or unable to return. The psychological and social impact continues. Communities were destroyed not just physically, but socially. Conclusion. On March 11th, 2011, at 2:46 p.m., a magnitude 9.1 earthquake struck off Japan's coast, one of the most powerful earthquakes in recorded history. 40 minutes later, a massive tsunami slammed into the northeastern coast, with waves reaching up to 40 meters, 130 feet, in some areas, traveling up to 10 kilometers inland. In the hours and days that followed, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant experienced multiple reactor meltdowns, the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. 18,428 people died or remained missing, most drowned in the tsunami. Hundreds of thousands were displaced. Entire towns were erased. A generation of Japanese people was traumatized. The economic cost was $235. 300 billion, the most expensive natural disaster in history. But the human cost cannot be measured in money. Families torn apart, children who grew up without parents, parents who lost children, communities that disappeared, ways of life that ended, trauma that continues. This was a natural disaster of almost unimaginable scale, a nuclear disaster that was preventable, a testament to human resilience and Japanese culture, a reminder of nature's awesome power, a warning about the dangers of underestimating risks, a story of loss, survival, and the ongoing struggle to rebuild. Rest in peace to the 18,428 victims of the Tōhoku earthquake and tsunami. You were teachers and students, parents and children, fishermen and shopkeepers, elderly residents and young families. You lived in communities along a beautiful coast. You died in minutes, swept away by forces beyond human control. To the survivors, your resilience, dignity, and determination to rebuild honor those who were lost. Your suffering and ongoing struggles must not be forgotten. To the world, March 11th, 2011, reminds us that nature is powerful, that preparedness saves lives but cannot prevent all tragedies, and that human decisions, like nuclear plant design, matter profoundly. March 11th, 2011, 2:46 p.m., the day Japan faced 3 disasters at once, and the world watched in horror and admiration as a nation mourned, rescued, and began the long journey of recovery. Never forgotten, always remembered. 18,428 lives lost, millions affected, a nation changed forever.